A brilliant and slightly underrated Rossellini film is 1954's Fear, starring Ingrid Bergman and Matthias Wyman, an exercise in more thriller or quasi-expressionistic tropes for the great director, compared with his more near-realist endeavours, although we certainly can identify some traits of the latter within the world depicted in this film. There are a few reasons why I would suspect that this film has been underrated, and they may centre around the film's perhaps slightly abrupt conclusion. And again, as I had with this same year's Rossellini lauded classic Journey to Italy, I'll claim that this is a film which is about all the moments leading up to a very specific dynamic moment. In this case, spoilers do get out of here if you don't want to know any more about this film's narrative. A husband forgiving his wife for having an extramarital affair, feeling horrified at his own malicious behaviour in attempting to enact a mind game upon her, engaging in a heinous deception of her as an act of deranged revenge, and preventing her from taking her own life out of a shame she has been consumed with at this stage. Now, no matter what happens afterward, Rossellini insists on the emotive prowess of this moment, when two players desperately denounce their behaviour leading up to this charged moment, and emotionally resolve to wipe the slate clean of the other's behaviour and carry on, annulling the suffering which both had been causing the other up to this time. Now, for all we know, Irene and Albert, Bergman and Wyman, choose to part their ways, splitting their marriage, and this doesn't, I feel, nullify the prowess of the film's ending. It is two individuals affirming the other that their scale of shame does not, or whatever, justify the taking of one's own life, and that a disgust at another's betrayal or trespass against you cannot remotely warrant a wrathful reprisal, as one can or will appear blinded by the long-term consequences upon the subject of your revenge, detesting the action to a degree that greatly surpasses an innate sympathy to all imperfect, fallible humans, and could only induce an aggressive shame in the avenger in the aftermath of, when said individual is totally destroyed by the aggrieved, incensed retribution. And prior to this moment, no matter how one feels about the ending, Rossellini's Fear is one of the most gripping films of its time. Richly, evocatively psychological, thoroughly engaging plotting, magnificent, enrapturing cinematography. There are two credited cinematographers. One, Heinz Schnackertz, does not appear to have any other cinematography credits of major note, whereas the other, Carlo Carlini, is also credited for Rossellini's other features, General della Rovere and Escape by Night, Fellini's I, Vitelloni and La Strada, as well as Solima's The Big Gundown and Margheriti's Seven Deaths in the Cat's Eye. He has no credits before 1953, so commencing so early on with Rossellini's Fear and the two Fellini films I, Vitelloni and La Strada is enormously impressive, utterly skillful. Though also it is a film that can demonstrate to an average viewer how, a typical story, some thriller yarn which you could see on some banal teleplay from the 70s or 80s, for example, could be completely enrapturing if it were told in such an alluring, captivating way. An average audience might be consciously appreciating, without it breaking their immersion in the displayed attention, the employment of the medium by the auteur, its use of contrasting shades of light and dark with its photographic enunciation, its choice of staging, blocking and angling in emphasizing the sheer emotional weight of a certain moment, how characters are framed amongst the usually aesthetically corresponding local environments, and how the selected glimpse of what would later turn out to be a larger narrative, with certain vital information being concealed from the subject protagonist, but also for a time from the audience as well, is more tangible and impactful in the film form, compared with literature simply excising certain information from the plot at its own convenience when a writer is feeling a bit smarmy perhaps. The sense of what exists outside the frame is innately psychologically relegated or assumed to be unimportant, more so than it is of fictional prose to the average subject, I would suspect at least. And so the affect of some revealed relevant information on a series of frames, images prior to the revelation, is more felt and powerful, feeling less like an act of rhetorical deception in a novel, and more like a realization in the viewer that they are too trusting of what the frames are displaying simply because the author has chosen to order these events in a certain way, and so maybe we can never trust what we witness in the film's runtime, as the filmmaker might be consciously avoiding shooting and showing scenes which will utterly reshape our perception of the frames he has allowed audiences to witness. Fear is one of my favourite films from Rossellini, along with the other 50s classics Flowers of St. Francis, Europa 51, Machine That Kills Bad People, and India Matribhumi. Slightly later achievements like Escape by Night and The Rises of Louis XIV. I really appreciate his earlier work, the first three features The White Ship, A Pilot Returns, and The Man with the Cross, and of course for later biographical, philosophically oriented epics like Acts of the Apostles, Socrates, Augustine of Hippo, Descartes, and the Messiah. The point is, there are a lot of outstanding Rossellini films, and those who only think of Rome Open City, the two spiritual sequels, Paisan and Germany Year Zero, and maybe Journey to Italy or Europa 51, maybe Flowers of St. Francis or Rise of Louis XIV, there is a whole rich body of work for you all to explore. Most of Rossellini's films, in my opinion, are stirring classics, and he's one of the most absolute impressive filmmakers to have ever lived, I will confidently claim. If you get the chance to, check out Fear. Actually, I recommended you leave if you haven't, so I'm not sure who would still be here. Anyone who has already seen and admires Fear, I suppose, in which case I have not told you anything you don't already know, though if you actually dislike Fear, feel free to share why in the comments below. Any and all perspectives are welcome here on the AOD. Thank you and good night. I wish you all great happiness and peace.